So let me just run you through the proposed agenda and what we've tried to put some context around what we've been doing. So the first session we did, we looked at skills and behaviours and where we see a decline in a certain type of role and how we see a growth in solution selling and consultative selling, and what was driving that, and how the power of the buyer was changing. In this next session, we looked at performance excellence and focusing on winning the winnable, and showing that there's a relationship between the aggregation of marginal improvements and how we can make marginal improvements. We can make a significant impact on performance, and this is really critical, that we know how to manage the performance like we would in a manufacturing environment, but knowing what are the key levers to drive the outcomes. In other words, how do we become efficient and effective? Today, we'd like to talk about how do you equip your sellers to negotiate and win the deals. And I'm going to look at it in several ways. We're going to start off with handling objections. There is a difference between objection handling and negotiation, although the two do relate to each other. Today, more than any other situation, it's essential that within your accounts and within your customer base, you build your power base, and so that you're not giving away margin. One of the key things is, if you can't generate the revenues, then make sure you can generate some profits from the revenues that you do generate. And there are good ways and bad ways of doing that. And I'm just going to sort of, at a very light level, because this is a program that we have on the academy, but it's about 6 to 7 hours long, versus I've got 30 minutes. So I'm just going to give you it at a top level. So we've looked at the developer skills, we looked at managing the process. Now we're looking at building up your power base so you can negotiate more effectively, and how to handle objections. We'll look at the different processes, and we'll look at some of the skills at a top level. So let me move on. Most selling activity and most sales training is aimed at persuading the customer to buy. And most buying activity is aimed at minimizing what is paid for the product. So selling the product would be easy then if you had the lowest price, because if that's all customers want, we just have the lowest price. But the real skill then is getting a good price is the real skill. In other words, there's one thing selling something to a customer, the different thing is making sure that it's profitable. And I'd like to sort of explain this concept. So the purpose then is, from one of my mentors, Dermot Bradley, who was ex-IBM, the aim is to develop enough power to be able to negotiate profitable prices and terms. And I think it would be fair, and this is not an ideal world. In an ideal world, the quality of your proposition would be so good that the prospect immediately agrees to buying it. Well, I think we can all dream on. That doesn't really happen very often. In the real world, your contacts and your prospects will raise objections, and to either agree, which you need to either agree to, or they'll reject you if you don't handle those objections or negotiate those objections effectively. So I'd like to ask you a simple question. What are the objections are you most commonly experiencing in the current climate? What are the sort of things that you're experiencing?
Should we fire that poll up now, Mike, and try and capture the top objections?
Yeah, please.
Okay. Okay, guys, so we should be able to see on screen here 6 questions. If you wouldn't mind ticking the boxes of what you think or what you come across as the most commonly experienced, and we'll get some feeling from the 50 odd people online as to where those challenges are. Let's see if we get common challenges here. Polling closed, just let me close it.
Okay, so we almost done?
It's rerunning, sorry there, something's changed. Just give it another few seconds and then we'll end the polling. Okay, thank you. I'll end the polling, we'll share those results. Okay, Mike, that's the results from today.
All righty, so I can't commit at the moment. We have other priorities. I can sort of understand that. We're too expensive, prices not competitive. Okay, we'll talk about how we might handle that. We prefer aspects of a competitor, interestingly. I'm not the only decision maker. We don't have the resources. Okay, so I guess what I was just saying there, in the real world, we'd like everybody to say we've got a fantastic solution, we have a great, fantastic service, they don't even bother looking at the competition. But the reality is customers are always raising objections. And we've got to work out, and this is what this session's about, is so how can we handle these objections? How do we negotiate? So there's maybe three ways of why is it not changing?
Just to say, we've had no. There was someone had put.
Am I the host, by the way, on this? Because
on the chat.
Oh, there we are. There we go.
There we go. Yeah.
Okay, so three ways to deal with objections. And I'd like to take each one of these one at a time. Avoid them altogether. And you might be surprised what we need to do. And some of the things that we're talking about, which were raised in those objections, is because we've still got work to do in this particular area. Qualify that you can change the rules. So price, for example, is one of those areas that we can explore and see whether we can change the rules. And once we've done the first two, then how do we negotiate around them? And I want to sort of explain something in this particular area. So first of all, if we look at avoiding them altogether, what happens if what's happened or what's gone wrong? The product is much more sophisticated than we need. Could we remove them and reduce the price? What's actually happening there? What do you think's happened? Any comments from anybody?
No, nothing coming on the chat.
Okay. Well,
yeah.
The reality is when a situation where you've provided a service or you provide set the expectations, you're giving your evidence of what your company can do before you know that it matches the prospect's needs. I'll give you an example of what I mean there. When you provide your evidence too soon to an organization, there is a danger that you lose the person. So many companies are telling their organizations what great things that they can do for their organization, but is it what they need? And on the other hand, if somebody has needs and you don't provide the right sort of evidence, and you make claims or don't provide the sort of evidence that they require, then they think you can't do it. So you end up losing the sale. So it's really important that to avoid them altogether, there is a lot of work that needs to be done understanding the customer's needs, understanding the context of what their requirements are and why. And that's absolutely essential, because one of the problems at the moment is if there is no compelling need, then you're not going to progress the sale. And that's one of the key things, spending time developing the needs and matching the evidence to support those needs, because it will minimize some of the objections because you've got a perfect match. Now, in another scenario, let me moving on to qualifying, can you change the rules? Why should objections just appear at the end of the sales meeting? There is no money at the moment. I need to speak to my boss. Delivery time is impossibly long. The situation here is that one of the things we talked about in previous sessions is the importance of robust qualification. one of the things that you should be doing with your quotes and with your RFPs and any inquiries is qualifying that you have a good solution, that you have, you understand where the competition is, you understand whether you've got some unique capabilities to service those organizations, you understand the timescales, we understand the money, we're talking to the authority, and as we've just said, you've got a compelling need. And out of the process there, that you will flush out things that will be good or bad. And we call them showstoppers. And if you, in the process of qualifying, you identify showstoppers, then what that means is that you have a situation that if you cannot change the rules, you're going to lose. And then that's the real point of qualification. If you're going to lose quickly. And if you then identify that you can change the rules and you get some sort of commitment and you get some sort of middle ground, then great, we're into level 3, which is a case of can we negotiate and change the rules. Now, assuming they've got a compelling need, and assume that you've managed to ensure that you can fulfill those needs, and we've qualified so that all the big things are dealt with, then we're down to residual objections and dealing with human behavior. And when you, at this point, I would say to you that we've got a need to deal with residual objections, a need for reassurance. The buyer has a favored position and he's looking for the best deal and he needs it. He also he's also a little bit concerned and a little bit of risk is in his mind. He's looking for somebody to listen. And it's now an opportunity for you to negotiate around the final issues. And that's what I want to focus in on, this process of negotiation and some of the behaviors.
So a question or two, Mike. The print industry, of which I've been part of for 30 odd years now, we're highly technology focused. Do you see technology as a differentiator of adding value at this point?
Absolutely, and knowledge and power is really important. So information about the customer, the way you use technology for the customer. In the print industry, one of the key things is how do we secure longer contracts? How do we differentiate? How do we build our uniqueness? And obviously, the more that we can understand the data, understand the applications, the more information that we have and more work that we do for the customers, it becomes part of the power base, as I'll try to explain in a moment. But if I may, go back to the point of negotiation. If we've created the needs and we've qualified the opportunity, the customer says to us, look, can we do something about the price? Or I need to, change the timescales, or you're just not, providing me the sort of comfort around support that I'm looking for, or delivering us on the timetables. Does the prospect expect you to walk away if they raise these issues? They're not. They're not. They want you to fix it. They don't want you to walk away at all. Sorry, for some reason because of this. It happened last time. It's not actually clicking down when I'm using either any of the 3 devices to move the slides forward, so bear with me. So anyway, so the prospect isn't expecting you to walk away if they raise issues. And this is what I want you to try and understand. There's a lot of objections coming at this moment in time, and some of them you've got to distinguish between, is that a qualification issue? Can you change the rules? If you can't, then step back. Is it because you haven't created the needs and haven't produced the evidence? Because until they've got a compelling need, they're going to have focus on other priorities. But if you've done those 2 jobs, then they start to raise residual issues. Then what I'd like to do is don't, because of the situation, give away margin, which you don't need to do. So let me explain what we can do. Don't rush in to defend the situation. So when somebody raises arguments objections with you, it is very easy to sort of say yes, but, and start to try and defend your position. better still would be to say, ask them why, and then sit back and listen. Why is price important to you? Why is these timescales issues? What are the residual concerns? Give me the context so that I can see the world through your eyes, and so I can try and help you. It's really important. And under the pressure and the stresses that we are at the moment, we spend a lot of time trying to argue why our prices are more expensive or why we're better than the situation. Whereas really what we should be doing is listening to them and giving them empathy before we give them a solution.
Hi, Mike. I was just going to drop in there because the last two sessions we talked about empathy as a differentiator. So, you know, changing that emphasis to listening and understanding when you know, your customers are going through so much difficulty is a real differentiator, isn't it? So that's a really key point you make there, I think.
Yes, I think in the current situation, we are feeling the pain of COVID, but so are your customers, and many of them are looking for empathy and people to listen to. And this is a great opportunity to show emotional intelligence and build rapport, you know, with your customers. And we have to do show a bit of patience. So maybe I can try and share with you a model. So how can we stay in control? We've got all this pressure. We've got all these demands from customers and these expectations, and they're all, their customers are demanding a lot from them. This is the time to apply the REAR model. And the REAR model is made up of, hey, I know it's incredibly difficult, but we should try and relax. We're here to listen to you. We want to understand the context of the situation. So we don't want to, start defending our positions and attacking the objections. And as I said to you before, we want to explore the context. This is so important that we use the word why. Why is that important? What are the repercussions, the ramifications? What are the consequences? So we start, and in the process of doing that, the customer is also building up the needs and telling you why these things are important. And I think it's also important to acknowledge with the customer, to let them know that you've heard them. Let them know that you have, they're looking, empathize with their situation. And once we've gone through that sort of process, then we can start to respond, because we understand the context, we understand the why, we've understood what's really important to them, both at a business level and at a personal level. And so then we can respond and provide some sort of solution. So it's important to stay in control. Instead of yes, but, yes, and. Let me understand the context. Why is this important to you?
Just a point here, sorry, Mike, just a point here. Matt Hooper just adds, salespeople need to ask the customers what their pain points are. So that's another sort of term for understanding the empathy, isn't it? What are the pain points?
Absolutely, yeah. And the way to get the pain points is not just to know what the pain points is, but we want to know how important those pain points are. And so the effect questions and why questions will help you. It's a bit like we want the customer to wallow. We want the customer to wallow in your area of expertise so that an issue becomes an explicit need. And when it becomes an explicit need, then they're talking themselves into buying from you. But in the purpose of negotiation, we are really trying to create an environment that we understand the context, and so we can explore the situation with them, acknowledge what they're trying to achieve before we respond and we use a yes and rather than a yes but sort of approach. Let me explain what we're trying to do here. So what we said is that to become a good negotiator, it's really important to understand the real needs and why from the customer. Because the customer is going to try and get the product and service at the best prices and terms. they may not always want, it's not always about price. They don't want instant delivery or small quantities. They may be more interested in how you can support them. They may be interested in your account management. They may be interested in terms of how you manage their data, all sorts of things. So unless you know what it is they really want, you don't have a position to negotiate. Let me try and explain a little bit more how this works, how to build up the power balance. In the real world, certainly for bigger contracts, and you know it yourself when most of you are both buyers as well as sellers. When you look at a number of organizations, you don't always get everything that you want. You might get great support, you might get great account management, you might get great products, but then goes with it is a price. And in other situations, you get a great price, but you don't get the support, you don't get the the product development, you don't get the account management. So there's always, in the mind of the buyer, he's trying to pick out the things that he wants, and he likes bits from a number of suppliers, but nobody gives him everything that he wants, very, very rarely. And some of these things become qualification issues, which is why you need to qualify carefully, and some of them are negotiable. And so it's important that we explore with our prospects where their breakpoints are. That's what qualification does. What is the breakpoint? And what's the range of movement? Let me try and show you this visually. So this understanding the seller's power and understanding theirs. You have, as a seller, have a most favored position. We call it an MFP. In an ideal world, that's where you would be selling at. There's the prices that you're achieving. That's the service level agreements that you'd be offering. But there's a sliding scale. And at one end, you have what we call the breaking point, which is your breaking point. And likewise, the customer would like to get it at this price. This is their most favored position, and this is their breaking point. And in the middle is the space for bargaining, negotiation. Now, as we probably know with the Brexit situation, when the situation is my favored position is short of their breaking point and vice versa, we have an unsuccessful negotiation. And qualification, using the tools that I mentioned in the previous time, will help identify this. If there is no way of getting to a negotiated settlement, then you qualify out. You're wasting your time. However, the skill is how do we, if we get ourselves into this breaking point, there's are you at one end and and they get quite greedy, but it's still worth you doing the business. And what I'd like to do is just sort of explain this sort of concept. If there's a long way to go, you'll have to move a long way to agree, but is it worth it? Well, if it's still within the bargaining area, many organizations are moving into that position because there's still an opportunity of doing business. But there's good ways of improving your power. The final agreement then will come down to what sort of solution you offer, what sort of price you have, what's your service level agreement, what sort of guarantees. And there's going to be various options. And the skill, which I see, unfortunately, is not enough planning goes into negotiating contracts. It's just done very, very quickly, and it's done badly. And at this moment in time, when demand is down and the profits are under pressure, this is really, really important to understand to do that. And there are three key things: time, information equals power. Now, as I said in the very first session, the power all seems to be moving towards the buyer. But what's power does a salesperson have? And this is going back to your point, Darren, about how do we build up our power. So on the one hand, the key thing is we've got to prospect and make sure that we have a luxury of choice, because there will be opportunities that are winnable and there are opportunities which we're not going to win. And it's very important to have enough so you can throw out the bad ones and focus on the good ones. We talked about, Darren mentioned about technology. The thing about technology is it links organizations together. It links data together. It links it speeds up the processes. It's the whole DNA between the two organizations become one. And so that makes you unique. The information that you have, the data that you've collected, the relationships that you have, the friendliness, all of these things are important. And when it comes to power, you need friends in an account to lobby the procurement people. Invested time works both ways. The more time you've invested in the organization, the more knowledge that you have, the more information that you have, is going to put you in a much better position and power base. But as I'll show you in a moment, it also can work in the opposite way. Also using, lobbying and to get people to vote for you is quite powerful. However, what does the buyer have? Well, there's a reason why they go and look for 3 quotes, because they've got something to back, they can go and choose. So they've got the power of the alternative. Well, if you won't do this, or you won't negotiate, or you won't provide that, we've got somebody else who will. I go back to the point earlier on. If you try to sell them, but we can do this and we can do that, but they're not actually what they want, and they feel like they're paying for something which they're not really going to use, then they'll get dissatisfaction. And they'll, in my, world in Xerox, and I know for a fact that we created our own problems in the past, is that they use invested time. Well, it's your year end. Surely you're not going to walk away from this deal now. I mean, how many times to Heidelberg and the people selling to you saying it's our quarter cutoff? Well, we've got this incentive. They use the time to get you to negotiate on price. So time works both ways. Time that you've invested because you've got more information and built up more friends, but they use time against you because that's it. And that's what's happening in the Brexit talks. You can see with most deals, whether it be the Good Friday Agreement, because hang on a second, Sinn Féin and DUP, if you don't sort this out, we're going to general elections and the polls are saying you're going to get hammered. We're in a situation, we've said we've got to drop dead. If we don't sort this out during the summer, we won't be in a position to have industry ready, for January the 31st. So time is used both by all organisations to drive out, a final agreement. So I was asked to sort of share with you, simple thing, what negotiation is, and it is the way to resolve conflict between 2 groups who both have power. It can only take place if both groups agree to it. The movement of opposing parties towards a mutually acceptable position. And so we started the session with saying, look, how do we deal with these objections? And you gave some very good objections. And some of them is because we haven't actually created the needs. There isn't a need yet. And so we have to wait for things, the green shoots of recovery for these companies to be able to start writing contracts with you. That said, the work that you do now and the information you gave will give you power. And secondly, we said there are situations where you need to qualify, because if they haven't got the budget, or they haven't got the timescales, or they're about to go bust, or there are credit issues, or there are you're not talking to decision makers, or there are some policy issues around that, then these are not anything that you can negotiate. They're qualification issues. You can't do the business, so walk away. But when you've done both of those jobs effectively, and the customer is starting to ask you about can you do this and can you change that, he's not asking you to walk away. He's just wanting you to get the best deal. And there's a good way and bad way of doing that. And using the REAR model and using TIP, which is the time, information and power, and other skills and behaviors, and how the verbal skills and the planning skills and understanding all of your variables, and how you negotiate high value things which are important to them but low cost to you, and high cost to them and low cost to you, how you use all your variables as an organization to negotiate and maximize margin is incredible. I see most organisations, if they've got £100, they discount it by £10. And so it costs them £50 to produce it in the first way. They only make £40 profit. A better way would be to give them more value. So they get £110 value, but it's only cost you £55 because that's 50% of its margin, its cost. So it's cost you £55 to make 45 versus £50 to make 40. That's a 12% margin by giving value rather than giving more, rather than dropping your prices. And there will be
sorry, Mike. Just back to an earlier point. Matt Wilson makes a point. A good rule in negotiating is if you're giving something up, always try and make sure you get something in return, which you were just talking about just before the comment about the value side, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. So the point is, and this is part of the training, is understanding the variables. I will if you will. So you know, there's a phrase. I'm a Yorkshireman, and there's a phrase in Yorkshire. There's nout for nout, and I've not found generosity being contagious. In other words, you know, it's easy to give stuff away, but you know, you don't get anything back. And the best way to get something is to ask for it. And the best way to stop giving stuff away is to say no. However, it's the way you do it, and the way and the planning and the skills. Many of your sales staff, I mean, I suspect many of the business owners, because they're both buyers and sellers, so they have a natural instinct for this. But remember what I said to you before: it's all right you having the instinct, but have all your staff got the skills, behaviours, and the verbal and planning skills, so that when customers are asking and dealing with these objections, they have the right approach and the right behaviours to deal with it.
Mike, we've had a couple of comments in. One was the win-win that Marcus has just picked up on. A few comments made around specification, sort of early doors, which I think you've kind of covered off a little bit in the qualification element about being over specified or not matched, and that's comes in your qualification exercise. And just a general really good point made about if your customers are communicating with you, then that's good, and obviously just harnessing that conversation and having the right kind of discussions. Just one point that kind of springs to mind with the current dilemma is, do you feel that COVID has raised any slightly different objectives and maybe linked? What's changed in light of that to the old process, or do all of these principles still apply sort of pre and post COVID?
Okay, so the issue, I think, at the moment is there's a drop in demand, and when there's a drop in demand, that becomes, I don't think it's just about price. People obviously look at, the phrase, penny wise, pound foolish, comes to mind. So I think people still recognise that they've still got to, if they're going to spend money, they want to spend it wisely and they want to get value. So I don't believe it's all down, and price is necessarily the issue. The problem is, I think the biggest issue was raised that there is compelling priorities. There is and some of their customers, you will have sectors who are doing incredibly well at the moment because this is creating opportunity. And in other sectors, the drop in demand is, I can think of, for example, commercial print will be struggling at this moment in time. But there'll be other areas where I've just come off a session where an organisation is helping who do marketing campaigns for selling TVs or mobile phones or old stock, or helping move cars, because the organisation. So they are working very, very, very aggressively in developing campaigns and customer incentive programs to churn and make things happen. And so you're going to have sort of winners and losers, but that doesn't alter that. I think what actually happens now is that this is the time when organizations need to look at their talent pool in their organizations and say, look, previously we had a certain amount of capacity and we were going to fill that, and demand was growing and the economy was growing and we were okay. When the situation is that the economy is shot to pieces, it's going to take a year or two for that demand to to rise, and it may never be exactly the same. You know, don't assume that what we've done in the past will be the same going forward. In fact, I probably assume the best thing to assume is it's not going to be the same. And so as a consequence to that, you have to up your skills and your behaviors. And I think now's the time to really look at your performance, look at the skills of your people, and start to develop great relationships with your clients, and walk the corridors with them, understand how you can help them and adapt so that you're in the right place and you have all the power and all the information and all the friends in the right places to help you win the contracts when it starts to kick off. So
if we're saying, and I think we're probably all in agreement about things being demand-led, the trick is for some have stuck to their knitting, and some parts of our sector have actually not stopped producing at all, have maybe repurposed and filled gaps in other way. But the trick seems to be, for some, to change your pattern of demand.
Yes, I mean, you've got to then look at the market. Where are the growth opportunities? Start to do the environmental appraisals. Where are you best suited to utilize your skills and adapt and change those skills? And what I'm trying to encourage is that the day of people just coming to you and saying, I want this, and this, and give me your best price. Well, you know, you've got to be very, very competitive in that situation. But there is a lot of opportunity within the print sector and within the communication sector, where organizations are looking for know-how, they're looking for solutions, they're looking for ways to help them do a great job for their customers, and that's, you know, and how they present their brands and their communications to their audiences. And I think the printing industry will flourish in those areas, but it's different. And I think there will be, if there's less demand, then it's important not to give away margin. And I think if you develop the right skills and behaviors, instead of, you know, if you can get 10 or 12% extra on your bottom line by being smarter and knowing how to negotiate and how to deal with objections, then surely that's not a bad starting point.
Yeah. It's a bit like the culture conversation we had last week. It all sounds very easy, but, you know, if it was that easy, everyone would be doing it, and no pain, no gain. But it makes it sound very easy, but clearly it's not, and it's something that needs to be looked at. Something that's close to our heart, and we've touched on it in previous webinars, and we will touch on it again, is the whole collaboration situation. So the implications for businesses interacting and collaborating, sort of pros and cons to that kind of approach going forward.
Well, I mean, I think it's inevitable that the bigger the organisations, they're looking they're looking for partners who can give them the best edge. And unless you're a printer who can do all aspects, then by nature you're going to have to collaborate. Even if you're only collaborating with the marketing departments or with the marketing agencies, there is inevitably, but it always has been in the printing industry, there's always an element of collaboration that goes on. But there's no doubt about it, organizations will be now outsourcing a number of the processes, and they'll be very selective of the partners that they want to outsource their work. As they downsize and right size, and as they downsize their offices, one of the opportunities, as I've said in the past, is I see a growth in outsourcing. It's already been happening, and I see more of that, but more and more processes will be outsourced.
Marcus has a great quote about Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers, and the fact that everyone appreciates that Fred was a great dancer, but the fact that Ginger did it backwards and in high heels as well. So I think at that point, over to you, Marcus, chat a little bit about the Academy.
Yeah, that was just about adapting, wasn't it? And actually looking at who manages to do really difficult things really easy. But Mike, I think one of the sort of key messages that comes over across all of this is about us as an industry and as business owners to get some confidence back, because you know, the power, getting the power back is, you know, we feel so powerless, I suppose, and have felt so powerless during this period. So really this is all about trying to get some power back, isn't it? And trying to exert some control, which you know, is just so important for a business at this point in time, by following the process processes you've outlined.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of investment, as I said, in both at a leadership level in terms of performance management and developing the right processes to develop your account strategies, your breaking in strategies, and to make sure that you're winning the eligible business for your organization. And there's a lot of work to be done on that side. But in terms of, you talk about confidence, and confidence, you know, one of the things about negotiation and getting best prices and winning contracts, it's confidence, and you can see it in the eyes of the sellers. The ones who are panicking and worrying and what have you, they're giving margins away. You can just see it in their eyes, and it's just, you know, it's self-fulfilling, because they just give away more and more and more, and really this is the time. I know it's difficult, is to apply the REAR model and build up your power base. And so but also the BPIF, and we've helped create it, have got this online academy. There's over 70 hours of training, and there are core programs covering from major account solution to account management to inside sales training, professional selling skills, negotiation skills. There's a whole set of programs. And it's very, very cost effective and supported by classroom coaching, online classroom coaching. So it's not just being left to themselves, but creating development plans and customize it for, you know, for the individual. And this is what it looks like. You've heard me mention SCOTSMAN. You've heard me talk about commitment selling, how to sell timetables. And these, to me, it's a time that most organizations have whether they be inside sales or whether they've got account managers or whether they've got people, you know, in the bid department. Most of the organization should be focused on sales and marketing in one way or another. And so getting the processes right, getting the skills right, just seems a very sensible thing to be. You've got productive processes, you've got effective sellers, you've got planned client engagement, and you're negotiating and building up your power base as you're working in these accounts, so that you don't have to give too much margin away. So we would strongly recommend that now's a time, because there's going to be less demand, make sure that you're competitive through your own manufacturing processes and through your people, which is really one of the most expensive assets and most important assets, I would suggest, to helping you win build relationships and win business.
Thanks, Mike. Yeah, no, it's a very cost-effective method. Access point, and there's a special offer for BPIF members, which details will be on information coming out later. So thanks, Mike. I haven't got any. There's been a number of comments. Dawn's mocked those up, so thanks, Dawn. No more further questions unless any come in. Next week, and we're talking to some of the individuals who have signed into this week's webinar to see if they can take part. But taking Dawn's view, trying to move and really investigate the collaboration space as a sort of very relevant business model and approach to developing your business. So next week, we're seeking to bring together a panel to review and discuss collaborations, what that means, what it looks like, how companies can embark upon a collaborative strategy. So we'll look forward to that. Thanks again for everybody taking part. Thanks for your comments. Mike, fantastic.
Thank you for having us.
Really appreciate it. And you know, power to printers, that's what we want.
Absolutely.
I believe we've got the power. So thanks indeed, and thanks indeed, everybody. Thank you.
There's just one little story that's worth talking. You mentioned change, and it's an interesting anecdote. A number of years ago, a little Swiss watch company developed a little digital watch, and they went to their powers in Switzerland and said, "Look, we've got this new digital watch. Would you be interested in developing and marketing?" And they said, "Oh no, we're not into that sort of technology." So they took it to Japan to a trade show. Anyway, it took off, And within 4 years, 400,000 jobs were lost in the Swiss watch industry, and they lost 70% market share. They had 90%, they went down to about 20 or 30%. And so that was talk about transformation and near disaster. However, the good news was things do come round. The Swiss came back fighting, and they came back with Swatch, the Swatch watch, and that started to win back the business. And then they started to get into branding, and they started to develop the Amiga and the James Bond, and they started to develop the watches. And a number of years later, guess what? They still got 70 to 90, 80% of the market share, and they still include hundreds of thousands of jobs. So beware of disruption. Things do change. They won't change exactly the same. If you always do what you've always done, you'll always be what you've always been. You have to change. However, don't be too scared. Things, do go in cycles.
Thanks again, everybody. Yeah.
Cheers.
Thank you. Yeah. Bye-bye for now. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.